How can one empire dominate the world for over 1,000 years, while another, led by one of history's greatest military geniuses, crumbles in just 15? It's a paradox that defies common sense. Rome, forged in blood and iron, endures through civil wars, plagues, and invasions. Yet Napoleon's empire, born in a blaze of victory, collapses almost overnight. Why? In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the hidden foundations that made Rome unbreakable and the fatal flaws that doomed Napoleon. What you'll discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about power, empire, and the architecture of human civilization. Any empire is only as strong as its foundation. Rome's growth was a slow, organic evolution over centuries. From a small city-state, it transformed into a republic, then an empire, a gradual process that allowed it to forge incredibly resilient political structures. The Senate, the legal system, the provincial administration, these were not creations of a single man, but the accumulated wisdom of generations. This lengthy, often accidental development embedded a deep-seated capacity for endurance within Rome itself. Even amidst civil wars, Rome's institutions endured. Take its legal system, a complex, evolving body of law that began with the 12 Tables. This legal framework continuously adapted, creating a consistent, predictable foundation across a vast, diverse empire. This bedrock of order reduced internal friction and outlasted any single emperor, influencing legal systems for centuries. Rome didn't just conquer, it assimilated. It offered a tangible path to citizenship to local elites from newly conquered territories. This was a sophisticated strategy of integration. By inviting diverse populations to participate, it fostered a deep, shared identity and loyalty to the idea of Rome itself, transcending allegiance to any single man on the throne. This profound sense of belonging was the true secret behind the Pax Romana, a 200-year golden age of peace. Beyond law and identity, Rome built an administrative machine of unparalleled efficiency for its time. Provincial governance, meticulous census-taking, and sophisticated taxation systems were the sinews of its power. The cursus publicus, an imperial postal system, ensured rapid communication across thousands of miles. These structures allowed laws to be enforced and taxes collected across vast territories, blending centralized control with a measure of local autonomy. Now, let's turn to Napoleon. His rise wasn't gradual, it was a rocket launch. He remade a continent in his own image. His empire wasn't an evolution, it was his personal creation, a top-down project driven by his singular, unyielding will. Where Rome's institutions were ancient and layered, Napoleon's were new, centralized, and totally dependent on him. This rapid ascent created an inherent structural fragility. Napoleon was a brilliant administrator. The Napoleonic Code was revolutionary for its time, but its centralized, personalistic origin meant it lacked the institutional independence of Roman structures. The entire empire rested precariously on his shoulders. The loyalty he commanded wasn't to an empire, it was to him, Napoleon Bonaparte. This created a system that was efficient but fundamentally brittle, unable to withstand the removal of its single indispensable architect. Napoleon meticulously cultivated a hero-savior myth, wrapping himself in the imagery of Roman emperors to project an image of permanence. Yet for all its grandeur, it was just a costume. Rome's power was in its very DNA, woven into centuries of evolving systems. Napoleon's power was in his singular genius, his overwhelming charisma. And genius, no matter how brilliant, can be defeated on a single afternoon. An empire marches on its stomach, but it endures on its economy. Rome's economic power came from its strategic control of the entire coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. They transformed the Med into a Roman lake, a massive, secure highway for commerce. This vast, low-cost internal market made it far cheaper to move essential goods, creating a vibrant, integrated economic zone. It was a far more stable foundation than mere tribute, binding the empire together through shared prosperity. Complementing this maritime dominance, Rome built an astonishing network of roads extending for over 80,000 kilometers. These roads facilitated not only the rapid movement of legions, but also the efficient transport of goods overland. Alongside this, the introduction of a standardized currency, the silver denarius, became the common unit of exchange across the growing Roman world. This dual infrastructure, physical and financial, created a system that could efficiently feed its sprawling cities and pay its legions. Napoleon's economic model was the polar opposite of Rome's integrated prosperity. He didn't want to manage an economy for growth, he wanted to wage war with it. His grand strategy was the continental system, a massive, Europe-wide embargo designed to cripple his greatest enemy, Great Britain. This policy was fundamentally punitive and militaristic, prioritizing the destruction of an enemy over the internal prosperity of his own empire. The continental system was a catastrophic failure. It denied European consumers access to cheaper British goods and vital colonial products, creating widespread shortages and economic hardship. It was impossible to enforce, and smuggling became a huge, lucrative industry. The blockade caused widespread unemployment, stifled local industries, and stoked deep resentment. It was a profound failure of economic statecraft. Most importantly, Napoleon completely underestimated Britain. Its economic power wasn't just European, it was global. The Royal Navy protected a sprawling trade network that stretched to the Americas, India, and beyond. Britain simply bypassed the continental system, finding new markets and routes. The embargo ended up hurting mainland Europe far more than it hurt Britain, stoking the very resentment that undermined Napoleon's rule. Every empire carries the seeds of its own destruction. For Rome, those seeds took centuries to sprout. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was not a sudden cataclysm, but a long, grinding process, a slow death of 1,000 cuts. It suffered through periods of intense instability, but crucially, its enemies were rarely united. Its final collapse was a slow, agonizing disintegration over generations. Napoleon's collapse was a spectacular implosion, born from the very thing that created his power, the Grande Armée. The relentless pace of his wars was utterly unsustainable. His army was increasingly diluted by mass conscription, filled with troops from conquered nations who felt little loyalty to him. Millions perished in the Napoleonic Wars. Entire generations were decimated, leaving a profound demographic scar. Napoleon's reliance on continuous warfare created a self-destructive feedback loop. 2 campaigns, in particular, proved fatal errors. First, the Peninsular War in Spain. What should have been a simple police action became a brutal, years-long quagmire. Spanish guerrillas, fueled by fierce nationalism and backed by the British, waged a relentless war of attrition that bled the empire of men, money, and morale. The Spanish Ulcer exposed the limits of Napoleon's centralized, force-driven approach. The second, of course, was the catastrophic 1812 invasion of Russia. Napoleon marched on Moscow with the largest European army ever seen, a staggering force of over 600,000 men. It was a complete disaster. The vastness of the Russian landscape and the brutal Russian winter left his forces without supplies. Of the more than 600,000 men who invaded, only a tiny fraction made it back alive. This single event shattered the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. While Rome's enemies were often fragmented, Napoleon's relentless aggression and insatiable ambition ultimately united the great powers of Europe against him. After the disaster in Russia, this coalition saw its chance. They fielded formidable combined forces, outnumbering the depleted French army, delivering a crushing defeat at the Battle of Leipzig. Even after his famous return from exile, the coalition held firm, delivering the final decisive blow at Waterloo. Behind these grand narratives lie the raw, often heartbreaking human stories. Millions perished in the Napoleonic Wars. Yet amidst this horror, individual acts of courage shone with blinding intensity. From the legendary Roman legionary Horatius Cocles, who single-handedly held a bridge against an Etruscan army, to the countless unnamed Roman citizens who rebuilt their cities and society after crisis, these were men and women pushed to their absolute limits, demonstrating the enduring, unbreakable human spirit. So the verdict is clear. The paradox of the 1,000-year empire and the 15-year empire is a profound lesson in systems design. The Roman Empire's longevity came from its resilience. It was a system that could absorb shocks and survive incompetent emperors because the system itself was stronger than any one part. Napoleon's empire was a model of brilliance, but also of brittleness. It was a centralized structure utterly dependent on the genius of one man. When the central pillar, Napoleon himself, was removed, the entire magnificent structure collapsed. Rome built an institution that could outlive men. Napoleon built an empire that could not outlive him. For deeper exploration, consider books like The Napoleonic Wars, A Global History and SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome. You can also watch movies such as Gladiator and Napoleon to see the eras brought to life. Finally, for a first-hand experience, you can visit historical sites like the Roman Colosseum or the Waterloo battlefield. What do you think? Are there other factors we missed that explain this profound historical paradox? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this historical analysis captivating, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into the forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.